think Marvin will be the first receiver to go, but I think Marvin might be the best receiver prospect since Julio Jones and AJ Green. The fact that there are two other guys that are close to him tells you about the strength of the class.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to ever get worse. I mean, every receiver class seems to be great.
And look, you know what that is? That is a result of where the sport is going. It's 7-on-7. Yeah. I think maybe the most interesting thing about it, if you look at it, have you guys noticed how many corners, like the great corners coming into the league, are the sons of ex-players? So Patrick Surtain, Asante Samuel, J.C. Horn is Joe Horn's kid, right? Like, so there are all these guys that are great corners coming into the league that are the sons of players. You know, Stingley is Daryl Stingley's grandson.
Okay,
yes. Derek Stingley for the Texans, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the reason for that is because a lot of these dads who played in the league are looking at their kids and saying, there are 100 kids like you playing receiver in America. There are maybe 5 that are playing corner. Play corner.
And look, you've got good good hands, but you don't even need good hands. You just need to have receiver skills. But don't worry about catching it.
Look at Patrick Surtain Jr. He's like 6'2", 6'3". He's built like a receiver. He's playing corner. Why?
But he can't catch.
Fred, to your point, like this is what this is. This is where the sport is going. And it's not that they can't. No, honestly, like it's the smart move to play corner, right? Like there are so far fewer of them, and like it's just if you look at it like just analytically, like do you want your kid thrown into a pool of 100 kids like him, or into a pool of 10 kids like him?
And conceivably, you can do a little switching around without too much trouble, whether it is to safety or and every team wants like minimum of 3 like high caliber guys in the secondary, whereas for the receivers, I think most teams are happy with like 2 high caliber.
Yeah.
So I think there's more jobs for guys like that.
And that's why you can get really good receivers. Puka Nacua in the 5th round, Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th round, right? Like there's depth too. Like a lot of the best athletes across the country now are playing receiver. And it's because it's 7-on-7. It's because of the way the game is going. There are a lot of guys where you look at them build-wise, like Deebo Samuel probably would have been a running back 30 years ago. Odell Beckham probably would have been a running back 30 years ago. Wow. Like now Marvin wouldn't have been. Marvin's built like a receiver. Malik Neighbors, like you look at his build, he probably would have been a running back 30 years ago.
Yeah. So was he 6
it's
foot
just
even?
It's just the natural. Yeah. It's the natural progression of like the way like okay like so running backs aren't getting paid. They don't last very long. I want my kid playing receiver. Everybody's throwing the ball all over the yard. Kids are playing 7-on-7 growing up. So anyway, Fred, like that's like why this is happening. Okay. You know, and like that's why it's become easier and easier to find really good ones because it's naturally where the sport has gone. It's where the high school game is going. It's where the college game is going. Right. That's what's coming into the pros.
All right, so we've established that there's elite receiver talent and you can get good receivers all over the draft. His point was that there's 3 star quarterbacks in this draft. May, Williams, and Daniels, and then there's a drop-off. Unless J.J. McCarthy does something, which some people say he is.
All right, so like I the way I'd break this down to people is like I think going into the draft cycle, which like let's call it New Year's Day, you had the first cluster of quarterbacks, which is the 3 guys you're talking about, right? Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, and then the second cluster, which is J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, Bo Nix. I think that's the way a lot of teams looked at it. And Nix and Penix went to the Senior Bowl, and they did not look very good. So ostensibly then the gap between the top 3 and the next 3 has grown. JJ hasn't entered into the process really yet. He didn't play in the Senior Bowl, so we'll see him at the Combine.
With the other 2,
does he look great? Does he look great spinning it at the Combine? Does he look great? Does he run a 4.4?
Well, that's what they're saying, Bert. Is I guess that they're saying that, you know, obviously he didn't get to throw the ball a ton at Michigan.
Yeah,
they're saying that his physical traits are like out of this world. That when he goes. Well, when he works out for teams, that it's like it's going to be a show.
Yeah, and I think that part of it's going to be really interesting because I think most of the scouts that I've talked to that have gotten up on him, and like actually stood next to him, like, man, he's not very big.
Oh, really?
Like, and they're, yeah, he's narrow, and I had one scout who, did school calls at Michigan who said he's sort of built like a stretched out Bryce Young, and he's not even that tall.
Oh,
so he's like 6'2", maybe, and like maybe 200. Like, I think he played at like about 202, which, I mean, for an NFL quarterback isn't very big, and it's something you have to consider, right?
Sure.
It's a question with Jaden Daniels too. I mean, Jaden Daniels, I believe, is like 200, 205. Like, he's
6'4".
Well, I've heard that's his biggest question.
And he's skinny. He's skinny.
Yeah, is that and I mean, there's some people that are saying, well, you're going to have to get a good backup because he will get hurt
because of the way he runs,
and
right?
also his build.
And the problem, and the one thing that you can say with JJ is JJ just turned 21, so maybe he'll fill out or whatever. Jaden Daniels turns 24 in December.
Right.
So, like, there's probably a little bit more of what you see is what you get with him.
Right.
These are like questions that I think these teams are going to have to answer. Like, I got around Drake May a little bit at the Super Bowl. He looks like a quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, the way he's built, like, he like looks like a franchise quarterback. Caleb Williams is not overly tall, but he's built. Like, he's stocky. So, like, these are all questions that you have to sort through.
Wait, but John, he had teased this going in. All right, so I told you that Brugler, his thing was, these three quarterbacks, you got to take a quarterback, but you disagree. What's your take on what you do?
So I think, I've used that art and science thing a few times the last few weeks. So I think the science to it says take a quarterback, right? Because you can't guarantee that you're going to be up that high, and the probability of getting it right, like in that part of the draft, is much higher than it is in another part of the draft. Blah 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 blah. The art of it, though, is you have to. The numbers tell us not all three of those guys are going to make it.
Right.
As much as we all think of them, as much as everybody all thinks of them now, the numbers say to us that all three of them aren't going to make it. So the art of the decision is identifying which one's the one. And I would just tell you, like, recent history tells us the teams that have gotten that guy have been not just, like, had the ability to get into that area of the draft, whether it was by trade or by being bad. It's also they identified the guy, right? The Chiefs, like, Mahomes was the second quarterback picked in that draft, the 10th pick overall, and the Chiefs moved up 17 spots to get him. They identified him. Buffalo, they identified Josh Allen. He was the third quarterback taken in that draft. They felt like he was the best one. They wind up moving up from, I believe it was somewhere in the middle of the first round. I think they went from like 21 to 12 to 7 to get him, right? So Buffalo identified him. The Ravens identified Lamar Jackson. They traded up and got him at the bottom of the first round. I think he was the fifth quarterback taken in his draft class, and he goes 32nd overall. You, of course, have Joe Burrow, which is like, okay, they're the worst team in the league, and it's the year that Joe Burrow's coming out. Jaguars, same thing. They're the worst team in the league. It's the year that Trevor Lawrence is coming out. But I think once you get past that first overall pick, what history tells us is the teams that have been able to get guys outside of the first pick are the ones that are really good at identifying him. So you have to be able to identify if either Jaden Daniels or Drake May is the guy. Chances are they both won't be, right? Like, maybe one or the other will be.
Right.
And then you have to have the balls to, if that guy doesn't fall to you, if it's the other guy, like, the right thing to do might be to trade out. Because there's nothing worse than getting it wrong. Because if you get it wrong at third overall, you've not only gotten that wrong, you've probably taken yourself out of the quarterback market for the next 3 years, and you're going to get everybody fired.
Okay, but all right, so I've heard guys say this. All right, saying you're going to get Mahomes, saying you're going to get someone like that probably isn't going to happen. That's what you just said is true. However, at the top of the draft, if you do your homework, you should be able to get a guy with the potential to possibly be a top 10 quarterback. And that's what you need, because a top 10 quarterback can get you in the playoffs. And once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. So do you believe Drake May, Caleb Williams, and Daniels all have the potential to at some point be top 10 quarterbacks.
They all have the talent.
All right, because then I take them, right?
They have the physical ability, yes. Again, like there's a lot more that goes into it than just that, So
it's a good start, though.
It's a good start. Zach Wilson had the ability, though.
I know.
Well, that's just it. I think all these guys you can put in the conversation based on what they've done so far in college.
Yeah.
Bert, to me, that's the scariest part. If you see your team, as the Patriots did when they drafted Mac Jones, just taking the guy that was left there and not. Like I would never had any conviction that they identified him as the guy. I think they were willing to take anything. And San Francisco, they had essentially said the same thing. They're like, "Oh, we're happy with Trey Lance. We'd be happy with this. We'd be happy with that." That's where it gets dangerous if you don't have the guy identified and you just take somebody.
No, they traded up for Trey Lance.
Yeah,
but
they wanted him.
They did
specifically,
but I don't think that they didn't trade up for him specifically, though.
Thank you.
They wound up getting themselves to the place where they preferred Trey Lance over Mac Jones. And I've heard all that crap that Kyle liked Mac over Trey. I could just tell you for a fact that's not true.
But that was part of the
narrative. Kyle did like Trey Lance more.
Jimmy Garoppolo was sitting there, and they said things like, "Yeah, we'd be happy with any of these guys."
No, but they made the trade to get Trey Lance.
They made the trade. Like, here's the difference, though. Like, when they made that trade with the idea we need to get a quarterback that we can build around for the next 10 years in here, and we like all of these guys. I just knowing the history of how these things went, right? I can just tell you that the Chiefs and Bills were different in that they identified those guys. Pat Mahomes, I'll give John Dorsey and Brett Veach and Andy Reid all the credit in the world. They said this guy is different. And John Dorsey and Brett Veach were working on Andy Reid for a year and a half, sending him tape. Hey, look at this, look at this, look at this with Mahomes. So those guys deserve a lot of credit because, not everybody saw it that way, right? And same thing with Buffalo and Josh Allen. Now, Buffalo whiffed the year before in, trading down because they were in the Mahomes spot, and Kansas City traded with them. But the Buffalo Bills, I can, again, tell you for a fact, they thought Josh Allen was better than Baker Mayfield, was better than Sam Darnold. They thought he was the best player in that draft, right? And so in both those cases, it wasn't we need to go up and get a quarterback, right? It was no, we need to get that guy,
right?
And I think that's what it has to be. I think you have to feel that sort of conviction,
right, on it.
And you might be right, you might be wrong, but. If you don't have that sort of conviction, that's where the Patriots got themselves in trouble. Because the Patriots, I'll take you inside that room and what happened in 2021. And I know there's been a lot of guessing and conjecture. I could tell you what happened in there. And what happened in there was, well, we think he's good. We don't think he's great. After what we just went through, we need to take a quarterback. And that's how they landed on Mac Jones. And, I mean, I can also tell you that, Davis Mills was a consideration in the second round. The idea of going and taking Davis Mills in the second round and a position player in the first round was...
But that's different than this year.
Right.
That's what
but the mentality is the same.
No. But if you believe there's three quarterbacks that have the potential to be top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL... You again, for the reasons you stated before, you might not be up here again. I heard next year's draft class with quarterbacks is incredibly underwhelming. So that's another year you're not going to get a quarterback. If you get these guys on the cheap, if you believe you can develop one of these guys into a top 10 quarterback, everyone knew the limitations of Mac Jones, and that's why he fell. If you're sitting at 3, maybe if you've got a huge conviction for a quarterback at 2, make the move up to 2. I mean,
well, that's what I'm hearing. There's a difference between saying all 3 of these guys can play. There's a difference between that and identifying the guy.
Right.
That's him.
There's a big
out
difference.
of those 3 or 4. No, that's the one.
But you need a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and if you don't get him this year, there's a good chance you're not going to get him.
Here's the problem. The problem is. There's a lot of risk too, in that, and I think that this is a nuance that people don't pay attention to. But if you take a quarterback in the second or the third or the fourth round, that doesn't preclude you from doing anything. If you take a quarterback third overall, you're probably not addressing the position for another 3 or 4 years. So you are legitimately, if you're Gerard Mayo, Elliott Wolf, whoever else, you are tethering your job security to the guy, because if that guy doesn't work out, you're getting fired.
Heath Schuler and Gus Farrat. What about
Joey Harrington?
What about RG3?
Brock Purdy,
RG3 and Kirk Cousins.
Brock Purdy is another one.
Okay.
Like right, so Brock Purdy makes up for Trey Lance, but Fred,
game set match, Fred.
The idea of the idea that you're going to hit on a 5th or a 6th or a 7th round pick and have that be your long term starter is a very
no. That's why I'm saying take one. Even more reason why I take one at the top.